Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse Chapter 1. In a room belonging to the male dormitory of Beijing University. This weather is really killing me. Xietain complained lightly as he looked at the world through the window. The rain was falling as if a deluge had beaten down on the world. The sound of the water drops hitting the window pane was soothing, but he could not appreciate the benefit. For the past year, the world's weather had become absurd from one day to the next. Deserts were suddenly flooded with all kinds of storms, and the Earth's poles began to defrost due to high temperatures. However, this was not all. Even when icy places like Antarctica began to thaw overnight, the next day temperatures plummeted again, freezing everything over. Scientists simply had no way of explaining the phenomenon. However, as a consequence of this, the major nations of the world practically forced the rest of the smaller countries to be careful with pollution, attributing everything that happened to malfunctions in the planet's protective layer. Now, even if the sun shone brightly, people always carried umbrellas in their hands, fearing a sudden storm. As if this wasn't enough, I have to go to work in this damn storm. Xietain sighed to himself and turned around to look for warmer clothes from the closet. Xietain was just a normal 20-year-old student. His father was a small civil employee with no power, and his mother taught English at an elementary school. On the other hand, when he was still 12, his mother brought home a pretty girl who was 3 years younger than him. Her name was Meng-Chi. Her parents had passed away, leaving her alone since no other family member wanted to take care of her. His mother, being the best friend of Meng-Chi's mother, decided to take care of the girl. Since then, the four of them had been living together, and currently, Meng-Chi was a student at a prestigious high school in the capital. She would be attending the same university of Xietain next year. As Xietain was rummaging through his clothes, the whole world seemed to shudder fiercely as many things began to move from their places. Quickly he held on to the closet tightly, preventing it from collapsing on top of his body and crushing him. Xietain felt something strange inside him, as if he had been punched hard in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. His face turned pale and he had the urge to vomit, barely restraining himself. After about 10 seconds, everything seemed to return to normal. Things stopped moving, the few paintings that had been saved from falling to the ground no longer threatened to fall. And the sound of the rain falling fiercely could be heard again. The choking and suffocating sensation that Xietain had felt a moment ago disappeared, and the cold coming through the broken windows embraced his body. However, he could no longer worry about the cold, the rain, or the previous earth-shaking. The Soul Records has arrived on planet Earth. You can now view your status window whenever you wish. The first time, the window will open as a test. What is this? He muttered to himself as he read the strange green message that had appeared on his retina. Xietain. Level, 0. Race, human. Job, none. Title, none. Strength, 12, 10/agility, 11, 10/health, 10, 10/stamina, 10, 10/mana, 109, 0/magic, 109, 10. Xietain's body was slim, but under his clothes were hidden very nice muscles due to his constant work as well as training. Considering that the number in parentheses shown in his status window was the base for a normal human being, the condition of his body was quite decent. Magic. He looked at the word magic with wide eyes. Magic. A classic element of fantasy movies and light novels. Now, not only had a strange window appeared that seemed to display his physical talents, but the attribute magic had also appeared on him. Interesting. To think that I would meet a human with a high aptitude for magic as soon as I arrived in this lower world. A seductive, playful, and even a bit innocent voice sounded from behind him, blocking him from thinking any further about the events that had occurred. Xietain turned around only to be stunned. A beautiful woman capable of provoking wars between nations was there when clearly no one was there before. Her skin was pale white with no imperfections and seemed to glow in the light, contrasting with her black hair that fell like a waterfall to the bottom of her back. Her eyes were a striking red that shone like two beautiful rubies. A black one-piece dress hugged her seductive curves, clinging to her body tightly, exposing only her 2 slender arms and 2 long, slender legs that could make even a saint drool. Xietain had never seen such a beautiful woman in his entire life. The woman before him not only had a seductive and charming aura but also had an innocent expression that did not seem to match with her body. However, before he could even ask for anything, several sounds and cries coming from outside made his body instinctively move to the window to see what was happening. Outside, the whole world he knew had changed, and what his eyes saw now was no longer the same thing he had seen just a minute ago. People were running everywhere, screaming and begging for help as they tried with all their might to get away from other people. However, the scariest thing was that there were many people eating other people as if they were beasts. Help! A pretty girl was running for her life as she looked behind her, getting as far away from one of those strange people as possible. In an oversight, she tripped against a stone and fell to the ground. "Watch out!" Xietain unconsciously shouted. Unfortunately, it was already too late. One of those strange people, with its bloody mouth, caught the girl who had fallen and fiercely bit one of the young girl's arms, making her cry out in pain. "Save me!" The young girl screamed painfully as she tried to free herself. Her expression was truly pitiful. Unfortunately for her, none of the people running could be bothered with her as they were too preoccupied trying to save their own lives. Soon, her body stopped moving. However, a few moments later, the girl stood up and began to stagger slowly as she chased after the noise. Seeing this, Xietan's complexion turned pale as he suddenly realized that these strange creatures were practically identical to the zombies from the Resident Evil movies. Ah! What's that? Xietain was shocked when he saw a bead the size of a human fist suddenly buzzing toward a zombie. The zombie didn't even react to the attack when the bee's huge stinger pierced its head, directly crushing its brain and killing it on the spot. The bee opened the zombie's head and began to eat something. After a few moments, its body seemed to grow a few more inches before it stopped. As if sensing something, the bee left the zombie's corpse and shot straight towards the male dormitory. Xietan's face changed when he saw that strange bee charging towards him. The bee's speed was really fast, and in just a few blinks it had crossed the broken window, aiming its sharp blood-stained stinger at his face. Xietain reacted on instinct. His right hand reached out and grabbed a wooden chair next to him. Without even taking a second to think, he struck forward with all his strength. The wooden chair impacted hard against the bee, sending it flying against the adjoining wall. Seeing that the bee had fallen to the ground but was still moving, Xietain raised the chair above his head and struck the bee's body fiercely 3 times before the creature stopped moving. A white energy orb shot out of the giant bee's body and entered his body. You gain level 5 Big Bee Soul Power. Agility +2, Strength +2. You have reached level 1. You acquire 2 status points to distribute freely. 2 messages flashed before Xietan's retina. He was surprised to discover how that strange energy seemed to nourish his muscles and bones, making his body more powerful quickly. What is this? Xietain quickly stepped forward to pick up what was next to the bee's corpse. Blood Manipulation, First Order Skill, Level 5, you can control the blood flow of your body or the blood of your enemies to some extent. The effect of the skill depends on the user's magical power, mana, and imagination. A strange red-colored scroll with an ominous aura emanating from it now lay in his hands. That's a really powerful skill. A somewhat surprised exclamation brought him out of his thoughts. Because of everything that happened and because he had almost lost his life a few moments ago, Xietain had forgotten the woman who had suddenly appeared in his room. He turned around and looked at the beautiful woman cautiously. Even if she was beautiful, with all the strange things going on he didn't care. Who are you? Xietain asked in a deep voice as he gripped the chair in his hands. Temporarily it was his only weapon, there was no choice. Hee, the beauty giggled softly, her face changed from innocent to charming like a seductress. My name is Lilith, a 6th Order succubus belonging to the demon faction. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse C2, Blood Manipulation, Part 1. Xietain was confused when he heard the beautiful woman's unusual introduction to him. However, although confused, he came to accept it rather easily. I see. Xietain nodded. His expression was indifferent and his guard was still up. Even if he couldn't win, at least he didn't want to be slaughtered without fighting for his life. So, what are you doing here? Lilith blinked her beautiful ruby eyes and her long eyelashes fluttered for a split second. She looked at the human in front of her with growing interest and said a little surprised, You're not surprised by what I just told you? You believe me so easily? Believe you? Xietain smiled bitterly and pointed towards the window before looking at the fist-sized bee he had just killed as he said, "The world outside is already a mess. A bee that should normally be the same size as 2 or 3 human fingernails is now the size of a grown man's fist. As if that wasn't enough, these strange messages keep flashing before me in a strange way. Why wouldn't I believe you? Even though you are just a lower existence, I like you. A person who knows how to accept reality as it is, the sooner the better. You can probably live a long time, human." Lilith's lips curved into a charming smile. She looked at Xietain as if she was a maiden in love and said with an innocent expression but in a seductive tone, "How about you become mine? I promise to take good care of you. I'm sorry, but I don't want you to suck my life essence to death," Xietain said indifferently. But only he knew that saying those words had cost all his willpower. The woman before him was simply too beautiful, every gesture, every word, every frown, and smile was fatal to any man. However, his life was the most important thing at the moment. Lilith wanted to say something but soon realized that Xietain was ignoring her, his gaze fixed on the red scroll in his hands. "You only have to wish to learn it and you will naturally learn it," Lilith pointed out as if she knew about his doubts. Xietain nodded slowly before closing his eyes. He wished to learn the scroll in his hands, and as if by magic, his brain seemed to receive a flood of information as a strange deep red rune appeared in his conscience. Xietain felt the blood inside his body circulating rapidly as a result of his agitated emotions. He could even hear the blood inside Lilith's body rushing normally, showing how calm she was. At the same time, he indistinctly felt that if he wanted to, he could affect the movement of his own blood. As for Lilith's blood, he didn't feel that he could do anything to it at the moment. "You have learned an external active skill. You can learn 4 more external active skills." As he opened his eyes again, green letters flickered on his retina and the blood-red scroll that was in his hands just a moment ago disappeared as if it had never been there. Xietain frowned trying to understand the meaning of the message, but it was impossible for him to comprehend it unless he sat there to study everything carefully. Unfortunately, he didn't have that time. Bang! The wooden door of his room received a resounding bang from the outside and Xietain was forced to prepare himself for the worst. The banging continued uninterrupted and the grunts coming from the other side of the door made it obvious that at least one zombie was trying to break through and, seeing how hard the door was being hit and how the hinges seemed about to give way at any moment, he knew he didn't have too much time to stand around without doing anything. His brain worked quickly and without hesitation he rushed to the TV, ripping off the wire forcefully. He then tied one end of the long black wire to the bed and the other end to one of the desk legs. After that, he walked over to the bee and started poking at something. Lilith watched his movements curiously with no intention of commenting on it and silently so as not to disturb him. Bang! The wooden door finally could not withstand the constant assault and burst open with a small explosion. Immediately after the door was kicked down, 2 students who had turned into zombies staggered in. Their blood-stained faces looked grotesque. Xietain could even see several bite marks where the flesh had horribly sloughed off. If it were him a few minutes ago, it would probably be hard for him to bear the urge to vomit from the sickening odor given off by the 2 moving corpses. However, after learning the skill blood manipulation, everything was different for him. It was well known that emotions affect the cardiovascular system of the human body to a certain extent. The greater the stress, the greater the amount of blood pumped by the heart, thus increasing circulation as a consequence. Then, Xietain came up with a slightly crazy idea. Was it possible that in some sense the blood circulation inside the body could affect the emotions a bit? Since there had never been anyone capable of controlling the blood to affect emotions, such a thing could never be proven. But after acquiring blood manipulation, Xietain discovered to his delight that while he was still a bit nervous, he was no longer as scared as before. The 2 zombies advanced rather slowly in Xietan's direction. Although the creature's eyes were completely white as if they were blind, they seemed to be able to smell life emanating from his body since their movements had a fairly clear direction. Just as they advanced, the 2 mindless zombies suddenly tripped over the wire that Xietain planted a few centimeters above the ground. The bed creaked and moved slightly due to the strong pull, but it was enough for the 2 zombies to fall flat on their faces. Xietan's eyes flashed as he shot forward at full speed, unwilling to pass up the opportunity. Reaching in front of the first zombie, he mercilessly stabbed the head of the now helpless creature with the sting of the bee he had killed not long ago. The mutated bee's stinger had a length of 2 human fingers and a width of at least 3 fingers, so it easily pierced the zombie's head, crushing the brain and killing the creature. Before the second zombie could react, Xietain quickly stabbed its head ruthlessly, killing it in a second as well. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 4. You get +4 stamina. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. You get +1 stamina. You have leveled up to level 2. You get 2 status points to distribute freely. Before Xietain could sigh in relief and relax his nerves, 2 more zombies staggered into the room while growling in his direction. Due to the strong pull of the other 2 zombies, the wire was currently practically dragging on the ground, making the small trap completely useless. However, Xietain did not panic and quickly concentrated. With a thought, he mobilized the mana within his body according to the instructions of the skill blood manipulation. After spending 20 mana points, Xietain used the blood of the 2 zombies killed by him earlier and, just as the 2 new zombies passed by the corpses of their kind, 2 arrows of red blood shot out at full speed towards the back of the creatures' heads. The congealed blood arrows were extremely sharp after being controlled by Xietain and easily pierced through the head of the 2 zombies, crushing part of the brain and killing the 2 creatures easily. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. You get +1 stamina. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. Strong. Xietan's eyes flashed as he looked at his hands. However, he soon noticed that from the corpse of the second zombie, he did not gain any stamina boost or other attribute. Seeing his frown, Lilith, who had been silent, patiently explained, "The more creatures of the same type and level you kill, the less benefit you will get as your soul power acquires some resistance against them. Only by killing other creatures will you be able to acquire more benefits. Of course, you can still level up by killing those low-level zombies, but you will only get 2 status points when you level up, no extra benefits." Xietain looked at her gratefully, which his doubts were cleared. However, he soon asked again, "Why are you here?" Only now that his nerves had calmed down a bit did he finally dare to ask more questions. If he had done so earlier, he might have died in a zombie's mouth or been killed by the giant bee from before. Lilith puckered her lips and giggled playfully as she pointed to the door and said, "I'll explain everything later. For now, don't you think it's better for you to look for a safe place?" Xietain looked at the broken-down door and finally nodded. In fact, this was not the best place to ask questions, so he quickly said, "You're right. Let me pick up a few things, and then we'll leave this place." He quickly grabbed a mountain backpack and stowed the cable he had used earlier, 2 large bottles of pure water, and some snacks he had bought earlier. He had nothing else of use there. Then, Xietain looked out the window and couldn't help but complain, "Really me and my bad luck." Xietan's room was on the 5th floor. It was impossible for him to climb down through the window. With no other option, he had no choice but to walk to the door to get out of the building. Lilith's beautiful ruby eyes had a strange glint in them as she looked at the head wound of the 2 zombies that Xietain had killed with his blood manipulation skill. Her full red lips curved into a charming smile before slowly following him out. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse C3, Blood Manipulation, Part 2. As he walked down the hallway of the guy's dormitory complex, Xietain had the nerves in his body tense and his muscles bulged slightly due to the tension. Because today was Saturday, most of the guys in the dormitory had gone out to enjoy the good life. Most of them could have fun during the times when studying was not necessary as their families supported them from behind. Unfortunately, Xietan's life was not so good. The salary of his father and mother together could only afford to pay for the college expenses of one of them, Xietain or Meng-Chi. Because of this, Xietain strongly refused to accept his parents' money and started working in a repair shop near the university. That way, he could study and his younger foster sister could study as well. Although she felt guilty, there were not many options for a poor family. Lilith, who was following him step by step, suddenly said in a casual voice, "How about using the 4 free status points you have?" Xietain did not look back and replied while he shook his head, "No. If I use them casually now, I might regret it later. Right now, I don't know which attribute could save my life in times of need, and a sudden impulse might be my only hope." Lilith was silent for a few seconds before nodding in understanding. She licked her lips as she looked at his back with glittering eyes and purred, "I like you more and more." Xietain's breathing became slightly heavy as he heard that charming tone of voice, and it took all his willpower not to turn around to rip the clothes of the beauty behind him. Something told him that if he tried to do something like that, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Besides, even though she seemed to be helping him, Xietain was a careful person by nature. Therefore, he was still with his guard slightly up against Lilith. Suddenly 3 male zombies appeared at the end of the corridor, crawling towards him with trembling steps. Although these creatures gave the feeling that they might fall at any moment, their steps never missed and they held steady as they walked slowly but surely. Xietain could feel himself becoming somewhat anxious at the appearance of the 3 threats and quickly used his skill to forcibly calm himself. He knew that losing control over his emotions at such a crucial moment could be the cause of his death. Lilith looked at his back with a smile. She was really curious to see how he would come out of this situation. Currently, there was no trap set up nor was there any blood in the vicinity to use. While Xietain could turn around and go back to his room to make use of the corpse of the zombies he had killed earlier, that would leave him exposed to more zombies coming out of the locked rooms as the sound of banging could be heard uninterrupted. Obviously, at this rate, many zombies would soon come out and seal the way out. Xietain took a deep breath and slowly walked forward while watching the movement of the zombies. They moved really slowly, but that didn't stop them from being terrifying in their own right and, as far as Xietain had seen so far, a scratch meant death. He tried to make use of his blood manipulation skill only to discover to his consternation that it seemed to have no use against these zombies. Lilith felt the flow of mana and knew what he wanted to do, so she quickly explained, "Although your skill is really strong, dead creatures are practically your nemesis during the initial stages as these zombies feel no pain. Try to warm their blood and then guide it to the eyes." Xietain's eyes flashed and he quickly understood what the succubus behind him meant. With a thought, he spent 15 points of mana fiercely reheat the blood inside the zombies' bodies and guided it to the eyes. The results showed immediately. The eyes of the 3 zombies exploded due to the internal heat and blood began to gush out like a fountain. Xietain did not pass up the opportunity and spent another 30 points of mana to create 3 frozen blood arrows from the blood the creature spilled, killing the 3 zombies at the same time. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 3. You have leveled up to level 3. You get 2 status points to distribute freely. Xietain had killed 2 other zombies after reaching level 2 in his room, one of them was level 4. With the accumulation of 3 other level 3 zombies, he leveled up again. The only regrettable thing was that he could not acquire benefits from these level 3 zombies other than experience. Every time Xietain leveled up, his stats would recover to the maximum point immediately. In short, even though he had spent 20 mana points in his room and another 45 just now to defeat the zombies, his mana recovered because he had leveled up. After thinking for a moment, Xietain took out a bottle of water and emptied its contents on the ground. Enduring the urge to vomit from the foul smell and bad appearance of the dead zombies, he walked over to the corpses and filled the bottle with blood. Previously, he was forced to spend 15 points of mana to force the zombies' blood out. This kind of consumption was one he could not afford. After all, he was now leveling up fast, but he knew that things would not always be so easy. Xietain's hunting became much more efficient as he went down floor by floor. Making use of the blood he had saved, he created small strings by spending only 2 points of mana, binding the movement of the zombies for a moment. Xietain would take advantage of that brief moment to approach and stab the zombies' brains with the mutated bee stinger. So far, Xietain had killed a total of 33 zombies from the moment he left his room. A thin strand of blood slid silently across the floor, catching one of the legs of a zombie, causing its body to almost fall and stopping it in place. Taking advantage of his 13 points of agility, which made him almost 50% faster than a normal person before the apocalypse, Xietain quickly circled around and stabbed hard at the back of the zombie's head, raising the sum to 34. You have acquired soul power of normal zombie level 4. You have leveled up to level 5. You get 2 status points to distribute freely. Reading the green message flashing on his retina, Xietain let out a sigh of relief. To climb from level 4 to level 5, he was forced to kill about 16 zombies, which had drained his stamina quite a bit and several mana points. Upon reaching the first floor, Xietain's footsteps stopped and he looked at the zombie blocking his path in shock. This zombie had 2 grotesque and powerful arms the size of a grown man's thighs. It was also taller, at least 2 meters tall. Obviously, this zombie was a more dangerous species. The hulking zombie also sensed Xietain's life source less than 5 meters away and moved toward him. Although this particular zombie was slower than Xietain, it was at least twice as fast as normal zombies. Taken by surprise, Xietain panicked and quickly moved his head to the side, dodging the zombie's fist by a notch. Bang! The zombie's fist caused a hole in the wall behind Xietain and his face turned white as he realized that if that attack had hit him his head would have exploded like a watermelon falling from a 10th floor. In the moment of crisis, Xietain kicked with his 14 strength points forward, forcing the burly zombie back a few steps. Before the zombie could attack again, Xietain threw a wave of blood into the air and directly spent 40 mana points to create 4 blood chains. Unlike the small strings of frozen blood, these blood chains looked much more robust and sturdy. After all, Xietain only needed 2 or 3 mana points to create a blood string, but for these chains, he had used 10 points each. Under his control, the blood chains tightly wrapped around the corpulent zombie's body, throwing it to the ground. Seeing his opponent incapacitated, Xietain advanced and stabbed with the mutated bee stinger. However, to his surprise, the stinger that was even sharper than a knife had only managed to pierce a few centimeters before being stopped by the zombie's flesh. The strange zombie began to struggle in an attempt to break free, but the chains of blood clung tightly and would not allow it to break free. Still, Xietain dared not relax and stabbed non-stop at the same spot over and over again. It was only after nearly 20 stabs with all his strength that he finally managed to crush the zombie's brain into a bloody mess. You have acquired Soul Power of Strength Zombie level 15. Strength plus 6, Health plus 5. You have leveled up to level 6. You have leveled up to level 7. You have leveled up to level 8. You get 2 status points to distribute freely. Xietain felt his body become much more powerful than before in a matter of seconds, and the tiredness he felt after stabbing with all his might 20 times disappeared completely. Ah! What is this? Xietain advanced and picked up a strange orb that had fallen from the corpse of the strength zombie. Rare treasure orb, contains a rare category treasure inside. Chapter end. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 4, Xietain Sword. The orb was about the size of a baby's fist and orange in color. Just by grasping it, Xietain immediately knew how to use the orb naturally as if it had been something he had known all his life. Squeezing his palm tightly, the orb flashed slightly, and when the brightness dimmed a new object appeared in Xietan's hand. Xietain Sword, its power is enough to pierce through the defenses of almost any creature below level 40 and its edge capable of piercing through the defenses of an armored car. When equipped, strength plus 20. The sword was dark golden in color with countless engravings along the blade and hilt, giving it a truly mysterious appearance. It measured just over a meter in length and its width was approximately 4 fingers of an adult's hand. Xietain slashed a couple of times and nodded in satisfaction. Although he was not at all skilled with a sword since he had never wielded one, with this Xietain sword he could finally kill enemies without having to get too close, risking his life in the process. Moreover, just by wielding the sword, his strength had directly increased by 20 points. He could feel terrifying strength circulating in his body and felt that he could crush a stone with a single fist. Curious about his current attributes, he called up his status window and soon several green letters flashed in his retina. Xietain. Status points, 16. Level, 8. Race, human. Job, none. Title, none. Strength, 20, plus 20, /agility, 13 /health, 15 /stamina, 16 /mana, 109 /magic, 109. With his current 40 strength points, Xietain was basically as strong as 4 people combined before the apocalypse. The feeling of growing step by step and seeing his progress before him was so intoxicating that even in such a setting he couldn't help but smile. Thanks to the fact that there were no more zombies on this floor, Xietain allowed himself to rest for 5 minutes. Although he was not physically exhausted, his mental fatigue was there. 5 minutes might not be much, but it was better than nothing. Because he had used more than half of the blood he had stored against the strength zombie earlier, Xietain refilled the bottle with blood and walked to the exit. At this moment, the campus was as if hell had descended on Earth. Students were rushing about in a disorderly manner while being chased by zombies, oversized insects, and animals of terrifying size. These strange creatures were also killing each other. The defeated were being devoured by the victors, becoming nothing more than sources of power for others to become stronger. Many students were also bleeding while screaming and crying, constantly asking for help. Seeing this, Xietain could not help but tighten his grip on the Xietain sword. Even if he was normally indifferent, even if he wasn't a social person with too many friends, seeing his own kind being devoured wasn't exactly pleasing to the eye. Humans kill pigs, sheep, cows, goats, and many other species to consume them and live. Lilith's voice, who had been silent all this time, echoed next to him. Now that the world has changed, humans are no longer the only ones who will hunt to survive. The sooner you accept this fact, the easier it will be for you. Xietain just continued to be silent. Even if he knew that Lilith's words were the truth, it was not so simple to change his mind in a matter of minutes. However, he also knew that his number one priority was to survive. Even if he had to crawl out of the hell, he would definitely survive and search for his family. A rather pretty girl was running while a brown dog that was almost 5 feet tall was chasing her at an outrageous speed. In a matter of seconds, the giant dog pounced on the girl and threw her to the ground. The girl's eyes flashed with terror as she saw the terrifying monster open its jaws wide. Just when her throat was about to be ripped in half, there was a sharp flash that flickered for a second. The giant dog's movements stopped completely, and a second later its head detached from its body. Warm blood fell on the girl's body, but after living through so many things, she did not scream and looked at the person who had just saved her life. This person was, naturally, Xietain. You have acquired mutated dog level 9 soul power. Agility +4, stamina +4. Stand up and follow me if you want to live. Quickly, he urged. Without waiting for an answer, he quickly moved towards another student who was being attacked by a big bee and cut it in two with his sword. The girl quickly stood up, scared. She didn't dare to linger as she began to follow him, knowing that he was her only hope of living. The other male student also followed in Xietan's footsteps without delay as he thanked him. Xietain moved across the campus in the direction of the gymnasium. That was probably the only place that could currently be safe, since there were no glass windows for the mutated monsters to get into. Although he urgently wanted to go find his family, he first needed to understand the situation he was in. Xietain knew perfectly well that rushing things in such a crisis situation would only hasten his steps towards death. Along the way, Xietain helped and saved the lives of more than 15 students. These students were all chased by animals or insects. As for those who were caught by the zombies, there was no hope for them. The zombies were not as fast as the mutated animals, nor did they have unpredictable attacks like the giant insects. On the contrary, they were extremely slow and their movements were clumsy. However, a small scratch meant death. A group of 5 students ran while a group of 10 zombies chased behind. They didn't even dare to look back and just concentrated on running with all their might. Unfortunately for them, just as they turned the corner, another group of 5 zombies suddenly appeared and started staggering towards them. One of the students panicked and his movements froze, being scratched hard by one of the zombies. The pain seemed to wake him up as he quickly turned to flee, as did his companions, only to see that they were surrounded. 5 zombies ahead and 10 blocking the retreat. Just as they were wailing and crying, there were several sword flashes, and in just over 10 seconds all 10 zombies were decapitated. Strong. Zhang Ming, a tall student, couldn't help but exclaim as he saw Xietain charging towards the front 5 zombies and killing them as if he was slaughtering chickens. There was a student this strong in our university? Look at all the people he saved, another student muttered in stupefaction as he watched the 15 people Xietain brought in. Although Xietain knew nothing about the way of the sword and simply cut using pure strength, his current agility was 17 points, almost double that of a normal person before the apocalypse. In addition, his Xietain sword was incredibly sharp, which allowed him to decapitate zombies as if it were nothing. After making quick work of beheading the 15 zombies, Xietain felt a little tired. He had killed about 60 zombies since the moment he left the male dormitory, and added to that he had also killed about 10 giant insects and 3 mutated dogs. All those kills had only allowed him to level up once, currently being level 9. But even if he was much stronger than before, his stamina was slowly depleting, and if he wasn't careful he might die if he was surrounded. Xietain walked towards the group of students, and even before they could say thank you, he pointed at the student who had been scratched earlier and said in a firm voice, "You can't stay. You must leave." Upon hearing his words, the group of 5 friends had a drastic change in their expressions. However, the 15 people who were saved by Xietain said nothing and simply stood behind him, looking at the surroundings in fear. "What? Why do I have to leave?" The pointed student shouted indignantly. "You were scratched by that zombie, I saw it before." Xietain said coldly. "You must know what will happen too, don't you?" The student's face turned pale. However, he was not willing to die, so he denied the reality by saying, "What do you know? What do you know if those damn creatures are zombies or not?" The students looked at him with sympathy. Xietain looked at him coldly and said nothing more, but turned around and started walking towards the gymnasium with firm steps. The students quickly followed him, including the student who had been scratched earlier. Xietain, who had been paying attention, turned around and in a matter of seconds appeared before the student. With a heavy punch in his stomach, the student was forced to kneel on the ground as he struggled to breathe. "I told you that you can't follow me." After saying those words, he turned around and walked away. The students did not dare to say a word, not even that student's 4 classmates. Currently, Xietain's mood was terrible, and after killing over 100 zombies, the smell of blood surrounding him was thick, giving him a savage aura that no one wanted to provoke. "I like this human more and more every minute, hee." Lilith looked at his back with flashing eyes, and her lips curved into a beautiful seductive smile, capable of enchanting any man's heart. However, no one seemed to be paying attention to her. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 5: A Closed Battle. Beijing University, being one of the most prestigious universities in all of China as well as one of the most important universities in the world that even foreign students attended, was extremely large. The campus was several acres in size, and the university was like a small city by itself. Supermarkets, karaokes, there were even some restaurants inviting students to stay on the premises without going out too much. The distance between the male dormitory and the gymnasium was only about 400 meters, but because all the roads were plagued with dangers in the form of zombies, evolved insects, and animals that seemed to have turned into beasts, crossing that distance had become a challenging feat. Xietain dashed relentlessly and slashed with his sword again and again. Along the way he had saved the lives of 5 others, increasing the number of survivors at his side to nearly 24. A man with gold-rimmed glasses and a rather handsome appearance was chatting with a female student who was looking at him with an obvious crush. This man's name was Xietain, and he was the vice president of the university's student association. Before the apocalypse, Xietain was a model student with excellent grades, and in addition to his good looks he had many female suitors. Even now that the world had changed, there were some surviving girls who looked at him with strange glints in their eyes. Xietain had also dared to fight since at that time he had no other options if he wanted to survive. He was currently level 3 and could handle 2 or 3 zombies by himself. When he encountered Xietain's group, he was about to be surrounded by 6 zombies, which meant death for him. After he killed 2 zombies and Xietain killed the other 4, Xietain joined the group and helped kill straggling zombies. After all, even for someone like Xietain, who had been fighting and killing creatures of a higher level than him constantly, it was not 100% safe to protect such a large group of people without 1 or 2 zombies slipping in. Swoosh! Suddenly, a green shadow appeared in the distance, charging towards the group of over 20 people at astonishing speeds. Xietain had just killed a mosquito that was almost 20 centimeters long, and before he could react, that green shadow had already passed beyond his defense perimeter, appearing in front of Xietain. Xietan's face turned pale and he took a step back. If he faced a few zombies he was still fine, but if a big bee or a mutated dog with above average speeds appeared, then there was no way he could even react. Because Lien Xian had only killed zombies so far, he only obtained extra attributes during the first 4 or 5 zombies and only gained stamina. Lien Xian had also used the 6 status points he had gained from leveling up in strength, so his speed was merely average. Lien Xian grabbed the girl who was chatting with him and didn't even hesitate when he threw her in front of that strange shadow, taking cover in the process. The green shadow suddenly flashed, and in the next instant, the girl's body was split in 2. Her blood splattered everywhere and a look of shock and incredulity shone in her eyes before she died. Even in her wildest dreams, she would never have expected that the normally cultured, polite, and gentlemanly Lien Xian would actually not hesitate to make such a cruel move. The survivors panicked and a few began to flee in all directions in a disorderly manner. Others did not move due to fear, and some smarter ones just walked away while trying to get closer to Bai Zemin, as he was the only hope they had of survival. As for Lien Xian's selfish act, no one noticed. No one except the beautiful and seductive but at the same time innocent Lilith. Though such a move was impossible to be missed by someone like her, there was no disdain or disgust in her gaze. She had seen people do worse things than what she had just seen just to survive one more day. The green shadow was so fast that no one could react to its speed. This strange creature suddenly seemed to realize something as it shot off at terrifying speeds toward Bai Zemin. Clearly, the creature had realized that he was the best tonic for it to evolve. Bai Zemin felt his scalp go numb and unconsciously raised his sword horizontally. Clang! The sound of metal clashing against metal echoed loudly. The green shadow was forced to stop its movements as its strength and Bai Zemin's were quite similar. Only now could Bai Zemin distinguish the appearance of the monster that was attacking him. The green shadow was actually a huge mantis that was almost 2 meters tall. Its terrifying eyes stared at him with killing intent flickering inside. Its 2 large scythe-like forelegs were pressing hard on the Xianyuan sword, trying to force Bai Zemin back. If it was Bai Zemin before obtaining the Xianyuan sword, he could have been seen to retreat. However, thanks to the 20 strength points the sword granted him, he could barely stand on equal footing. Be careful. That mantis doesn't specialize in strength at all. Its current speed must be almost twice as fast as yours. Lilith's voice rang in his ear, giving him vital information. In fact, even without her telling him, Bai Zemin knew that his current speed was far below this mantis. Before, if not for his reflexes and luck, his head would have already separated from his body without even knowing how he had died. Bai Zemin grunted as he pushed forward with all his might, pushing the mantis back. Then, without even a second's hesitation, he added all his saved status points into agility. In just a split second, he felt his muscles become stronger but at the same time softer. Bai Zemin felt as if lightning flashed in his body, giving him a slight itch that soon disappeared. Swoosh! The nearly 2-meter mantis disappeared and in the next instant appeared before Bai Zemin again, slashing downward with its scythe-like legs. However, the current Bai Zemin could finally see its movements clearly. Clang! Bai Zemin and the mantis engaged in close combat with the intention of slaying the other. To survive, to evolve, to become stronger. From the other people's point of view, they could only see 2 silhouettes flickering constantly and hear the constant sound of metal clashing against metal. For them, it was hard to think that a human being could actually fight in such a way against such a terrifying creature without losing ground. It was only then that they realized Bai Zemin's strength. Although Bai Zemin's combat experience was average and his sword skill deficient, the Xianyuan sword was a rare grade treasure capable of piercing through the defenses of almost any creature below level 40. The mantis obviously had not yet reached that level as its sides had small cracks that slowly spread with each collision. However, the mantis was a natural hunter who made use of its sides from birth, so it was naturally more skilled than he was in combat. Each had their own advantages, and for an instant, the battle was deadlocked in what appeared to be a stalemate. Several zombies, apparently attracted by the sound of battle as well as the strong smell of life, began to stagger over. Bai Zemin quickly spotted them and knew that at this rate not only would all the survivors die, but even he would also fall when they surrounded him. After all, the mantis might not be afraid of infection, but he was. Strengthening his determination, Bai Zemin surveyed the battlefield and slowly backed away, luring the mantis to a specific spot. Upon reaching that spot, Xietain spent 60 points of mana and created 6 bloody chains using the blood of the dead zombies. The mantis was clearly taken by surprise, and the chains wrapped tightly around its body. Its movements were stalled and its 2 sides were stopped in midair by 2 bloody chains. The beast struggled fiercely trying to free itself, and the chains restraining its sides began to stretch taut as if they would break at any moment. Xietain's face changed slightly when he saw this, and he quickly rushed forward and slashed towards the creature's head with all his strength. After a flash of sharp light, the mantis movements stopped for a moment before its head fell to the ground, followed by a fountain of blood shooting out of its neck. You have obtained the soul power of Great Fast Mantis, level 25. Agility plus 14, Strength plus 10, Magic plus 10, Mana plus 10. You have leveled up and reached level 10. You get 2 attribute points to distribute freely. You have leveled up and reached level 11. You have leveled up and reached level 12. You have leveled up and reached level 13. You get 2 attribute points to distribute freely. A huge orb of soul power came out of the Great Fast Mantis body and entered Xietain's body, nourishing him and taking his power to higher levels. In addition, he also directly gained 4 levels as a result. Besides, the mantis had dropped other things after its death. Next to its corpse was 1 red orb, 1 orange orb, and 1 scroll. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 6 Elites. Fighting against high-level creatures was really risky. A single mistake was enough to send anyone on their way into the underworld and pay a greeting to the legendary god of death. In fact, even fighting a level 3 zombie during the first few minutes of the apocalypse was extremely difficult. One touch, the slightest scratch, and it would all be over right then and there. It didn't take a bite or too much contact for a life to end. In truth, if it weren't for Xietain's luck, he would probably be dead by now. At that time, because the window of his room was small, the level 5 Big B had no choice but to fly directly that way, which made it much simpler for Xietain to attack it since he knew where the assault would come from. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to defeat such a fast and unpredictable monster. It was also thanks to that single kill that he obtained his skill blood manipulation. If it wasn't for this skill, Xietain wouldn't even have been able to leave his room successfully and would have become zombie food by now. However, although fighting high-level monsters was risky, the rewards of being victorious were far superior to the rewards one would get from defeating monsters at the same level. Just the extra stat points alone were equivalent to 2 or more levels, considering the fact that each person only got 2 stat points per level, not to mention the drops. Xietain took a step forward and quickly put both orbs and the scroll into his backpack before standing up again. Immediately and without even a moment's rest, he stomped hard on the ground beneath his feet and charged towards the zombies staggering in his direction. A minute later, the remaining zombies had been purged by Xietain. Teacher Jia. What happened to everyone else? Xietain asked with a frown as he looked at a female teacher in her 30s that he had rescued earlier. Student Bai. The rest. I'm afraid they ran away when they saw things were getting ugly. As for the direction. I'm sorry, I'm afraid I don't know. The teacher replied with a bitter smile. This teacher's name was Jia Jiao, and she was a teacher of the third-year students, so she knew Xietain. Her personality was quite kind by nature, and in the past, she had treated Xietain quite well even though he came from an ordinary family. I see. Xietain simply nodded as he looked at the 12 people who remained. About half of them had fled upon seeing the zombies approaching from all directions. These people would most likely die unless they dared to fight for their lives, but even then, the chances of dying were much higher than living. As for this, Xietain could do nothing about it. Currently, it was already difficult for him to survive, and a single Great Fast Mantis had forced him to use all the status points he had been saving for times of crisis. If he were to encounter 2 of those monsters, then Xietain would most likely die unless the battlefield conditions favored him greatly. Since those people fled, then they no longer had anything to do with him. He simply saved them earlier because he was just in passing and didn't want to see his kind become food for other species. Let's go. We need to move towards the gymnasium. Only then can we get some rest. He said and turned to leave. The 12 survivors followed him, not daring to stay behind. Their eyes filled with fear, for the future looked intently in all directions for dread that a strange mutated creature would take away the life they had been protecting for so many years. On the opposite side of the male dormitory was the female dormitory. The distance between the place where the girls rested and the gymnasium was exactly the same as the distance between the gymnasium and the male dormitory. A group of about 20 people moved in the direction of the gymnasium. This group of people was mainly composed of women, but there were also 7 men among them. However, no matter whether it was the women or the men, they all looked at the back of the woman who was leading them with respect, admiration, or love. A group of 5 zombies stumbled toward the crowd of survivors. Seeing their distorted expressions and their blank eyes, many of them could not help but shudder along with the small sound of choked sobs. The woman leading the group and carrying the lives of nearly 20 people on her shoulders had beautiful silver-colored hair and bright blue eyes. Her skin was as white as milk and as smooth as the purest silk, giving her an appearance similar to that of a real fairy. However, her expression was as cold as eternal ice, with no apparent emotional flow. Yet, although her expression was as cold as ice, her body was as hot as fire, filled with curves in the right places and extremely charming. Upon seeing the 5 zombies, this young woman of only 22 did not panic, her gaze did not change in the slightest. She waved her hand and 5 ice pikes appeared floating above her head. With another wave of her hand, the 5 ice pikes shot towards the incoming zombies. With great precision, the 5 ice pikes struck the heads of the 5 zombies that were moving at embarrassingly slow speeds, creating a hole the size of a small fist in the head of each target. However, no blood came out of the wounds as a small layer of ice sealed them. When the rest of the survivors saw this, their expressions changed for the better and their idolatry towards this woman increased several folds immediately. On the other hand, the woman's expression was still as cold and indifferent as ever. From a different direction, another group of survivors was advancing at a rapid pace under the leadership of 2 men. This group had about 30 people, so the strong vital smell attracted many zombies as well as other grotesque creatures that intended to devour them in order to evolve. 2 zombies suddenly appeared from inside a building and staggered towards the survivors. However, before the survivors could even scream in terror, 2 arrows flew and struck the brains of the 2 infected, cutting them lifeless immediately. The survivors looked at the young man holding a bow, wearing sports clothes, and carrying a quiver behind his back, with admiration and envy. This young man ignored them and picked up the 2 arrows he had used before, wiping the blood on them with a rag of torn clothing. Swoosh! Suddenly a mutated dog appeared charging at a speed 3 times faster than a normal person. The big brown dog opened its jaws wide with the intention of biting the young man's head off. With the jaw strength of this level 9 mutated dog, the young man's head would be shattered in a single bite. However, what greeted the dog was a huge hammer. Bang! The dog's head popped off in pieces. The dog's brain matter, blood, and flesh flew everywhere, making a bloody mess. The animal collapsed on the ground completely lifeless. Even if you are fast, if you don't attack me first, you are too weak, stupid dog. A burly man with a beard on his face spat on the dog's corpse. This man looked to be about 35 years old and the expression on his face was savage. He held a metal-colored hammer that was almost as big as a door with his 2 hands, wielding it with apparent ease although it was clearly a heavy weapon. The group continued to advance towards the gymnasium. Of course, Xietain did not know that apart from him, there were other people who had the same idea and the same temporary goal. However, even if he did know, he probably wouldn't be too surprised. After all, the gymnasium was located right in the center of the university campus, so it was accessible from all directions. Moreover, the gymnasium was also one of the few facilities that could be considered comparatively safe. Apart from Xietain, there were other people who also dared to fight or simply had no choice but to fight if they wanted to survive. As a consequence, there were several people who had their own fortuitous experiences, gaining powerful skills and treasures that did not belong to this world. 20 minutes later, and after making several detours to the area in order to find the easiest and least difficult path for the survivors he had saved, Xietain was finally only 50 meters away from the gym and reached his first goal. However, things seemed to be a bit complicated. Student Bai, now what do we do? Jiao asked with a pale face as she watched the scene in front of her. Xietain frowned slightly as he crouched in a corner and saw the dense group of zombies wandering near the gymnasium. There were over 50 zombies, all of them too close together for him to pass. Even for someone like Xietain, it was no easy feat to fight against 50 creatures that could defeat him with just a scratch. If it was in a place where he could move, then Xietain was confident that he could take out a few hundred zombies given enough time. However, fighting 50 of these creatures in such a constricted place was challenging even for him who had been steadily leveling up. What stupefied him most was that these zombies didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 7, Clearing the Path. As Xietain watched the movement of the group of zombies several meters ahead, he quickly noticed that some of them were banging on the doors in an attempt to break them down. However, these doors were completely metal, so it was absolutely impossible for these zombies to break through no matter how hard they tried. The sound of bangs from the metal door had attracted other zombies, causing that the group of a few more than 50 soon reached 80. This, coupled with the sinister atmosphere of the surroundings, caused that the disordered emotions of the students and teachers that Xietain had saved to become even worse. Could it be that there are people in there? Such a thought flashed in Xietan's mind, and the more he thought about it, the firmer that idea became. In order to survive another day, Xietain had not only been casually swinging his sword back and forth decapitating enemies, he had also been paying attention to the behavior of the creatures as much as possible. Since zombies were the largest quantity temporarily, they were the type of enemy he knew the most about. From what he had observed so far of the zombies, these slow but fatal creatures could sense the presence of any kind of life as well as notice the smell of blood from about 20 meters or so of distance, and even if that wasn't exactly the limit, it was certainly accurate enough. There are definitely people in there. Xietain finally concluded. If not for that reason, then he couldn't think of anything else why the zombies would be so intent on not moving anywhere else. He looked back and saw the people he saved looking at him, which gave him a headache. If it wasn't for these people being here, Xietain would have already taken out the treasures he obtained after defeating the great fast mantis, and, among those treasures, maybe there was something that could help him get out of the difficult situation he was in. However, he did not trust these people enough to bring out such treasures in front of them. It was precisely because he did not want to reveal his strength completely that he merely used his blood manipulation for a moment in order to defeat the mantis before stopping as quickly as possible. As if she knew his thoughts, Lilith, who was standing next to him, smiled and said casually, "How about you just abandon them? Everything will be much easier for you if you leave behind these burdens that could stab you in the back at any moment." Xietain looked at her with a frown without saying anything. "Don't look at me like that, just saying." Lilith shrugged her shoulders and didn't say anything else. She knew it was impossible for Xietain to do something like that. After all, it had only been about an hour since he had been forced to fight for his life wielding a sword. There was no way he could change that much without experiencing the cruelty of the world. However, Lilith was sure that he would adapt soon. Otherwise, then he would just die unless he had the strength to back up such a mentality. Just when Xietain did not know what to do, the group of now more than 80 zombies suddenly became hectic. One arrow flew from a distance, accurately striking a zombie's forehead. Before the zombies could react, another arrow shot out from the same direction and another zombie collapsed. Strong. Xietain was a little surprised. He didn't know who the attacker was since there were several buildings blocking his view. However, that person's archery skill was really top-notch. Unfortunately, after 5 arrows, the assault was temporarily stopped. Apparently, the attacker was quite close and the zombies were surrounding that person. "All of you wait here," leaving those words behind. Xietain jumped out from his hiding place like a tiger and charged towards the zombies. In a matter of seconds, the distance of 50 meters separating him and the zombies had been crossed. Xietain slashed with his sword twice at lightning speed and the heads of 2 zombies flew into the air. You have acquired level 4 normal zombie soul power. You have acquired level 4 normal zombie soul power. Within 5 seconds, 7 zombies had been decapitated by Xietain. Liangpeng, who carried a huge 2-meter hammer, swung it at a zombie, sending it flying 10 meters. The zombie fell to the ground with the upper half of its body deformed and its head completely crushed. However, he soon noticed a man several years younger than him slaughtering zombies like ants, and his eyes widened. F*CK D*M in it. What's wrong with that insane speed? Liang Peng cursed. Bai Zemin's current agility had already reached 54 points. This meant that he was more than 5 times faster than the average person before the apocalypse. His movements were extremely fast, so when Bai Zemin had killed 5 or 6 zombies, Liang Peng had only killed one that was close to him. On the other hand, Bai Zemin also noticed Liang Peng with his huge hammer and was surprised. Wasn't that the university security guard? At what point had he become so strong as to carry that hammer? However, just as his mind was beginning to wonder, another change swept the battlefield. Ice bullets. A cold but pleasant-sounding voice echoed. Immediately afterward, 10 tiny spheres of ice floated into the air and shot out towards 10 different zombies, hitting them in the head with accuracy and taking their lives. Oh? That woman's control over mana is greater than yours. As if that wasn't enough, her current magic power is only slightly less than what you had when the soul records reached this lower world. How strange. Lilith's surprised and somewhat confused voice sounded next to Bai Zemin. Since the time he had saved other people and these people didn't even look at Lilith, Bai Zemin had come to the silent conclusion that she was invisible to others and only he could see her. Therefore, he wasn't too surprised to see her casually strutting around the place. Bai Zemin looked at the woman who had joined at the fray and his eyes could not help but light up. What a beautiful woman! Her silver hair and blue eyes had made her look like a snow lotus, but at the same time, she was like an ice fairy. However, although he appreciated her beauty, that was all. After all, Bai Zemin had already seen the incredibly beautiful, seductive, and innocent Lilith. Bai Zemin's movements did not flinch in the slightest as he continued to decapitate zombies, and for every second that passed 1 or 2 fell at his feet. As if the arrival of the silver-haired woman marked a new beginning, the arrows resumed their slaughter. However, for some reason, the shooter's speed increased without losing accuracy in the slightest. The group of more than 80 zombies was terrifying. Anyone would be overwhelmed by them and even an evolver would die if surrounded. The danger from these creatures was further heightened as the gymnasium was enclosed by buildings, making it a bad place to launch an attack but a good place to defend. In this case, since the humans were the attackers, they had no choice but to suffer. However, no matter whether it was Bai Zemin, the silver-haired woman, Liang Peng, or the archer hidden among the buildings, they all had their own qualities of which they could be proud and could be considered the cream of the crop among the students and professors of the university. Thus, less than 2 minutes later, all the zombies, including the most separated of the group, had been annihilated. Blood had formed several puddles and flesh was scattered randomly all over the place. The smell was extremely repulsive and the sight could scare anyone. However, the people who fought this time had to fight against death and crawl from dozens or even hundreds of corpses to make their way here. Therefore, none of them had too much of an overreaction. The 3 fighters in sight looked at each other with a hint of caution in their eyes. Now that the world had changed, it was hard to tell if people's hearts had not. In consequence, none of the 3 trusted each other too much. The silver-haired woman with the ability to control ice looked at them coldly. In her gaze, there was even a hint of disgust that was hard to notice. The atmosphere had become somewhat strange, neither of them seemed willing to speak. At that moment, the sound of hurried footsteps coming from the distance caused Bai Zemin's gaze to turn in that direction. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 8: Stronger and Stronger. A handsome young man of 22 or 23 in blue sportswear, with a bow in his left hand and a half-empty quiver on his back, hurried over. So that guy is the archer from before. Bai Zemin thought silently. When the young archer saw the silver-haired woman, his eyes lit up and as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, he smiled. Bing Shui, I'm glad you're okay. Bing Shui? Bai Zemin blinked before he finally realized the reason why this woman looked familiar. Shangguan Bing Shui, a 4th-year student and current Student Association president. She was not only the most beautiful woman on campus, but also the #1 person in grades. Bai Zemin knew a little about her because he had met her a couple of times when she, as student president, organized student assemblies to report important information and events. However, since she was not important to him, he had simply forgotten about her existence. I'm glad you're okay too, Chenhe. Shangguan Bing Shui's cold and indifferent gaze did not change very much when she saw the young man. However, Baizemin noticed that the strange glint of hatred or repulsion had dimmed greatly when she looked at him. Anyway, since the zombie problem was fixed, Baizemin did not stay to listen to this group's conversation and turned around, walking away quietly. "Wait a moment, little brother," Liangpeng quickly shouted when he saw him walking away. His words had attracted the attention of the other pair. Baizemin stopped and turned around to look at him silently, waiting for his next words. "How about you stay here with us?" Liangpeng offered. "With the strength of the four of us together, we can easily wipe out those creatures and live a better life." Baizemin had a strange glint in his eyes. He simply turned around and as he walked away said casually, "I am simply going to look for a dozen students and teachers whom I saved earlier. I didn't go out of my way to clean up this place to casually leave." "Eh?" Liangpeng was puzzled. On the other hand, Shangguan Bing Shui looked at him coldly before turning around and walking away as well. The young archer, Chen He, quickly followed her as they chatted with each other. 10 minutes later, the group of survivors rescued by Baizemin, Liangpeng, Shangguan Bing Shui, and Chen He joined together to form a large group of about 70 people. Because the storm was still raging with no apparent intention of stopping soon, the blood and metallic smell it gave off were washed away by the rain in a few minutes. This could prevent other creatures from approaching this place in search of food. However, it also had its disadvantages. One of these disadvantages was that everyone's clothes were completely wet. Unfortunately, they could only hold on like this for now. After arguing for 5 minutes, the people hiding inside the gymnasium were forced to open the doors regardless of their fear. Although none of them were willing to open the doors and risk letting danger in, after Liangpeng threatened that if they did not open the doors he would break it down by force, they had no choice but to give in. Baizemin was surprised to discover a total of approximately 30 people hiding inside the gymnasium. Among these 30 people, there were men, women, and some teachers. They all looked at them with apprehension and suspicion. As for this, Baizemin ignored it. He separated from everyone and walked around the premises, making sure that there was no hidden danger of any kind. The Beijing University Gymnasium was really huge, and although it was called a gymnasium, it was a huge building with all kinds of functions. There was a large indoor basketball court, a sports equipment room, and a cafeteria. The cafeteria was Baizemin's target on this occasion. Bang! Bang! The metal door was closed tightly. Baizemin, who had moved away from the group, could hear the sound of banging coming from inside. He could not help but frown slightly as he thought. Since the cafeteria had glass windows, some insects probably managed to get in. As for bigger creatures, that was impossible since there were metal bars on the windows. Unless a monster with a lot of strength or sharp weapons like the great fast mantis appeared, there was no way they could get in. Therefore, that sound could only be from zombies. Baizemin looked to the left and right to make sure no one else was there. After making sure, he opened his backpack and took out the 2 orbs he had obtained earlier as well as the scroll. "How does this color thing work?" Baizemin thought aloud, forgetting that there was another existence there who could hear him. "It's the colors of the rainbow," Lilith pointed out with a beautiful smile. Seeing Baizemin's questioning look, she explained, "From lower rank to higher rank, treasures are divided as follows. Red orb is equivalent to a normal grade treasure. An orange orb equals a rare grade treasure. A yellow orb is equivalent to a magic grade treasure. Green orbs are equivalent to epic grade treasures. Cyan color means legend grade treasure. Indigo colored orbs are equivalent to semi-god grade treasures. Finally, violet-colored orbs mean god-grade treasures." The corner of Baizemin's mouth constricted several times and he couldn't help but complain, "You should have stopped your explanation on magic grade or epic grade treasures. Now that I look at this red orb, suddenly I don't think it's worth much." "I think you're misunderstanding something." Lilith smiled and reminded him of something important. "Even a red-grade treasure is more valuable than a high-tech machine gun. Let me explain something to you. When you defeat a creature, you absorb its soul power. When that creature's soul power is much higher than yours, the soul record concentrates all the power you were unable to absorb in the form of treasures. The higher the level of your enemy, the higher the chances of getting a higher quality treasure, and the higher the remaining soul power, the higher the probabilities go up even more. Therefore, even the red-colored orb in your hands is more valuable than you think at the current stages," Lilith concluded. Hearing her words, Xietain couldn't help but feel better. Although he felt like asking more questions, he first wanted to finish what he was about to do. The questions could be asked later. After squeezing the red orb hard, it broke and a new treasure appeared in front of Xietain. Velocity boots, normal grade treasure, extremely light, easy to wear, and automatically adapts to the body. When equipped, agility +10. Xietan's eyes lit up and his heart filled with joy. It was just a normal treasure, but these boots increased his agility by +10 points. This was equivalent to 1/5 of Xietan's total agility. He quickly equipped the boots and immediately felt his body become much lighter than before. Now, with his 64 agility points, Xietain was more than 6 times faster than a normal person before the arrival of the soul record on planet Earth. Repressing his latent excitement, he did the same with the orange orb. Full coat, rare treasure, a jacket that covers from the upper body to the knees. It can stop anything from light shotgun shells to 9mm caliber bullets. When equipped, all attributes +5. Xietain held the jacket in his hands and almost wanted to roar at the sky to say thank you. With this treasure, he was now impervious to several types of firearms. Even if medium caliber bullets were too strong, with this treasure his survivability had skyrocketed another level. He didn't even have to fear being scratched by zombies. As long as he protected his head and from the knees down, there should be no problem with his safety. Without delay, Xietain took off the wet jacket he was wearing and put on the full coat. He immediately felt his attributes improving once again, much to his delight. That treasure is good. Among the best quality within the rare grade, just like your Xietain sword. Congratulations. Lilith smiled cheerfully at him. Xietain was surprised when he realized that she actually looked genuinely happy for him, puzzling him. "Lilith, why are you nice to me?" he asked, feeling a little suspicious. Lilith bit her lips and blinked her long eyelashes as she said in a soft voice, "I already told you. I want you to be mine." Xietain rolled his eyes and wisely decided to stop asking. Although his appearance wasn't bad, he wasn't a handsome guy either. Much less so handsome that the biggest beauty he had ever seen in his entire life would fall in love with him at first sight. Without delay and fearing that someone else was coming to this place, Xietain turned his attention to the remaining scroll. Special Forces Soldier, unranked passive skill, level 5. By learning this passive skill you will automatically become a person with the same level of combat experience as Special Forces troops. At the same time, your control and knowledge of your world's firearms grow exponentially. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 9, Fast and Scary. Special Forces Soldier? Xietan's eyes lit up when he saw the name of the skill. After seeing the vague but concise information available on the skill scroll, his gaze became even brighter. Currently, Xietain was countless times more powerful than any human being before the world changed. His strength had reached 55 points thanks to the Xietain sword and the full coat that he had just obtained. His agility had reached 69 points and the rest of his stats were also at least twice that of an ordinary person. However, although he could currently dominate his enemies by overwhelming them due to his stats, treasures acquired, and his blood manipulation skill, Xietain was very clear that if he faced an enemy on equal terms with him but with real combat experience, the one who would be unlucky and meet a fatal fate would probably be him. What Xietain lacked the most at this moment was combat experience, control of different martial arts, etc. But with the skill scroll in his hands, this problem could be solved immediately. He only needed to wish for it and he would immediately become an experienced person as an elite soldier with years of training and battle experience. However, Xietain hesitated. Unclassified skill, he muttered under his breath. Although he didn't know how the level of skills and their rankings worked, Xietain, who obtained a skill ranked as first order skill, couldn't help but feel that the skill Special Forces Soldier wasn't that good in the long run. Before he could think any further, the beautiful and charming Lilith interrupted him with a sweet smile. "You don't need to worry. Although in fact, in the long run that skill might not be so good, it's a passive skill." Listening to her, Xietan's eyes shone brightly as he realized that the word passive was the key in this matter. Even after facing so many dangers, Xietain had not forgotten about the warning he received when he decided to learn his blood manipulation skill. That warning was reminding him that he could only learn 4 more external skills. External active skills are those skills that need mana movement to function and that you didn't learn on your own throughout your life. Lilith explained patiently. Before, you were just a normal human with no training, and yet, nevertheless, you were able to learn a terrifying skill in just a few seconds. Xietain did not dare to miss any words and focused all his attention on her. Lilith continued, although it might be fine now, if you learn too many external active skills, in the long run your brain will be overloaded by all the accumulated information and your body cannot support such a stress. That's precisely why you can only learn 5 active ones at first. I'll explain more about this when we have time, as I prefer not to rush things. However, you don't need to worry at all. The passive skills you can learn through skill scrolls are endless. That was all he needed to hear. Xietain looked at Lilith with a rare smile and slowly said, "You really are my lucky demon, Lilith." Without waiting for a reply and without seeing her reaction, he closed his eyes and wished to learn the contents of the scroll in his hands. The scroll in his hands turned into countless particles of light that flowed into his body. In the depths of his soul, a bronze-colored rune appeared with countless engravings on it. Xietain immediately felt a slight prickling in his mind that instead of being painful, was uncomfortable. Martial arts of self-defense, fighting skills to kill the opponent in the shortest amount of time possible depending on the circumstances, control over bladed weapons, knowledge about firearms as well as the correct way such weapons worked and the optimal way to use them. So much information flooded Xietan's brain, it was so much information that for several seconds his mind went blank, not knowing how to react. He looked at his hands in disbelief and couldn't help but mutter, that's how strong the elite soldiers were before the world changed. At this moment, only he himself knew how horrible his strength had become. His stats had not changed at all, but Xietain was confident that if he met the great fast mantis again, he could finish it off in less than 3 seconds even without using his blood manipulation skill. In fact, Xietain did not know that even his gaze had changed. His eyes had become sharper and more piercing, like a sheathed blade waiting for the moment to show its lethality to the world. Well, you gained the combat experience of the best elite soldiers in the history of your world, so it's understandable that your strength took a big step forward. Lilith smiled. Her voice was extremely pleasant to listen to. Although you were strong by human standards before, your combat experience was simply too lacking. Now, you can barely consider yourself a novice. Xietain looked at her doubtfully. A novice? He didn't think so. Lilith looked at him with a smile that didn't seem very friendly and said slowly, in your world, you could consider yourself an elite among humans. But that is limited to your world. There are countless other worlds with countless other fighters and different cultures. In my eyes, you are similar to a baby just learning to walk. In the end, Xietain raised both hands in surrender and his emotion cooled. Although being proud and arrogant was good, Lilith was right. Currently, he had merely just begun to take his first steps. Too much arrogance or confidence could end up killing him, and he definitely had no intention of dying. Lilith also noticed that Xietain had put his feet back on the earth and could not help but smile. If he became too proud just because of something so small, it would be too disappointing for her. Fortunately, it didn't turn out to be like that. Xietain looked at the metal door in front of him. He could still hear the frenzied banging of the creatures inside, trying to forcefully break down the door. If the floor gets too stained, it will be a headache to clean it up later. Xietain said casually and opened the door without even hesitation. Immediately, like wild beasts released from their confinement, zombies staggered out from inside the cafeteria. Their hands trying to capture their target as quickly as possible and their blood-stained faces gave them an extremely horrible appearance. Xietain did not even unsheath his sword. He took a big step forward and raised his right foot, directly striking the first zombie in the throat. The sound of bones breaking into countless pieces was extremely scary, and anyone who heard it would undoubtedly be shocked beyond what any words could describe. The struck zombie flew several meters away, hitting the zombies behind it in the process. When it hit the floor, it was no longer moving. The zombie was still alive since the brain was intact. However, Xietan's kick had destroyed the jaw and crushed the upper bones of the spine. Therefore, although its brain still functioned, it could no longer use its mouth to bite, nor could it move its hands or feet. The zombie was no different from any other zombie killed by Xietain before. No. If there was a difference, there was no blood flowing like water from a fountain. In total, there were more than 15 zombies inside the cafeteria. With almost 70 agility points, Xieain's body was constantly flashing, appearing and disappearing amidst the group of zombies. The sound of bones breaking into pieces along with the sound of the zombies' bodies falling to the ground after being hit was extremely clear in the place. Sometimes he used his fists, sometimes he used his palm or the side of his hands, his feet, his knees, and sometimes he used his elbows. Xieain's entire body had become an extremely robust, sharp, and formidable weapon capable of claiming the life of any enemy. Less than 10 seconds later, all 15 zombies lay on the ground, alive, but no different from those who were actually dead. Some had all 4 limbs broken, others had their jaws snapped and their spines separated into countless pieces, and the heads of others had been turned at an impossible angle, disconnecting the brain from the rest of the body. Xieain's expression stayed impassive at the horrifying sight. With his blood manipulation skill, coupled with the experience of humanity's strongest elites, his heart could no longer be shaken by such a thing. However, the sound of bones breaking, the sound of bodies hitting the walls and tables, naturally attracted the attention of other people. Shangguan Bingshui, Chen He, and Liang Peng appeared outside the cafeteria. They had obviously come to see what was going on after hearing the commotion. Chen He, who was holding his bow and an arrow ready to be shot at any moment, could not help but suck in a breath of fresh air when he saw the miserable condition of the corpses on the ground. Even the usually wild and strong Liang Peng had a distinct change of expression. He looked at Xietain standing amidst the corpses and could not help but mutter, "Is he still human or not?" On the other hand, Shangguan Bingshui's beautiful but cold face had slight frown. Her cold gaze switched back and forth between Xietain and the zombies on the ground. She had noticed that, apart from the miserable condition their bodies were in, there were no bleeding wounds there, even the creatures' heads were practically intact. Blood Warlock, Succubus Partner in the Apocalypse. Chapter 10, Calling Home. The basketball court was quite large and the stands had enough seats to fit a few thousand people without any problem. Currently, sitting in different seats, students and teachers looked in the direction of the cafeteria with fearful eyes. "Big sister Sure, do you think something bad happened?" A small-built female student asked in a low voice as she hugged her knees and cuddled tightly in an effort to give herself warmth. "Xiaolan, don't worry. You also saw how strong Big Sister Bingshui is. Even if some zombies appear, they won't be a problem against her." Wuxia said in a firm tone, trying to sound as confident as possible not only to convince her friend, but also to convince herself. Xiaolan bit her lips tightly as her body trembled constantly. In the end, she could not hold back her tears and began to sob, "Big sister Sure. I am so scared." Song Qing turned into a zombie suddenly and Xingna was bitten to death. "Many people died and I won't be able to talk with them anymore." Wuxia, who was barely containing her own emotions, finally couldn't help but start to cry. She had just tried to communicate with her family. Unfortunately, she got no response. She already feared the worst. "I'm cold. I want to wear dry clothes. I want to feel warm. I want to hear my mother's sermons again." Wuxia whispered in tears. This kind of conversation could be heard everywhere inside the gymnasium. The students were terrified, waiting for a dark and unknown future. A few hours ago, they were all laughing and chatting happily, worrying about what kind of clothes they should buy to look their best. However, now all they wished for was dry clothes to relieve the bone-chilling cold. Even the teachers, who were the responsible adults, were in no position to relieve others when they themselves did not know if the next moment a strange creature would walk through the doors and claim their lives. "What happened here?" Shangguan Bingshui's cold voice was the first sound to break the silence of the place. Xietain did not answer immediately. Instead, he gathered several tablecloths on the floor and tied it end to end, thus forming a huge square of cloth. Then, he began to carefully move the body of the immobile zombies on top of the cloth square while slowly explaining. "There is enough food in this cafeteria to sustain about 100 people for approximately a week. Besides, I don't feel comfortable in crowds either, so I'm planning to make this place my temporary resting area. So, I'll take care of these zombies. You took care of these zombies, you say. Shangguan Bingshui muttered in a strange voice as she watched Bai Zemin work. Except for the initial glance, he had not looked back at them again and simply continued to work tirelessly. Many thoughts were constantly flashing in Shangguan Bingshui's mind, making it extremely difficult to comprehend her. He was not thinking as many things as she was. He simply looked at Bai Zemin's back and asked, "May I ask how?" "Right, we still don't know your name." "You are Bai Zemin," he casually replied. Bai Zemin wasn't trying to act cool, this was his real personality. Even before the world became chaotic, he was not good at dealing with many people due to certain past incidents. "I see, Bai Zemin. It's a pleasure to meet you." He said politely with a smile. He was extremely handsome, his archery skill allowed him to become the best in his club and his grades were in the top 10 every semester. All these excellent qualities together with his unknown but powerful family made him the prince charming of countless beautiful girls. Even among the boys, he was popular because of his kindness. "Same here," Bai Zemin replied without much interest. His top priority now was to fully ensure his safety, then make a call home to check on his family's safety, and finally understand the rules of the new world better. Therefore, he was not interested in making friends with anyone just as he had not been in the past. He's expression became a little uncomfortable at Bai Zemin's clear coldness and a bitter smile appeared on his handsome face. "How did you deal with them?" Shangguan Bingshui asked. She could see some blood stains on the ground. However, that blood was obviously from the 4 large mosquitoes that were dead and torn to pieces on the ground. Then, Shangguan Bingshui was curious to know how it was possible that the young man in front of her killed the zombies without injuring them. "They are not dead. They are still alive," Bai Zemin replied, finally finishing dragging the 15 bodies. "What?" Shangguan Bingshui's cold and indifferent expression broke for a moment when she heard his words. Bai Zemin began to drag the large square of cloth towards the exit with a bit of difficulty but with steady steps. Although his strength was 55 points in total, he had not yet reached a level where he could drag 15 adult people casually. As he walked, he replied, "These zombies are still alive. It's just that I destroyed all the connecting bones of the body, so even if the brain is intact, they are no different from dead zombies since they can't do anything. I didn't want to stain the ground where I will sleep with blood." Shangguan Bingshui's eyes lit up and she finally understood the reason why the zombies' bodies were in such a terrible condition. Previously, she had assumed that Bai Zemin was simply a barbaric and violent person, but after listening to his explanation she understood that she had been wrong. Although she somewhat admired his strength, that was all. From her point of view, there was no trustworthy person in this place. To Shangguan Bingshui, the only person she could trust a bit was her childhood friend He. As for the rest, they were all useless. Especially the men. Currently, Shangguan Bingshui was surrounded by both men and women. Lian Xian, the vice president of the student association, and Chen He, the skilled archer, were constantly trying to engage her in conversation. Liang Peng, the strong man with a terrifying hammer, looked at the bodies of some female students and teachers casually without caring too much about the world outside. After carrying the 15 zombies out of the place and dragging them to a nearby building, Bai Zemin returned to the gymnasium. He simply ignored the stares he was receiving and walked away quietly with no intention of chatting with anyone. Upon arriving at the cafeteria, Bai Zemin used his blood manipulation skill to remove the blood that stained the floor, sending it through the broken window to the outside. Because the glass was broken, rainwater was constantly pouring in and the areas near the windows were soaked. In addition, the cold was really unbearable. After a few minutes of consideration, Bai Zemin ripped the legs off several tables and used the tops to cover the windows one by one. To prevent the wood from falling off, he used several cabinets and refrigerators inside the room, thus sealing out rain, wind, and decreasing the chances of an insect getting in. Then, Bai Zemin closed the door and locked himself inside the cafeteria. He turned on a dim light and sat on a chair away from the window and door to rest. 5 minutes later, he took his cell phone out of his backpack and, with trembling hands, called his mother. "The number you wish to reach is out of service or out of battery. Please try again later." Xietain took a deep breath to calm himself, not wanting to think about the worst-case scenario. With lingering fear, he dialed Meng Qi's number. The number you wish to reach is out of service or out of battery. Please try again later. Receiving the same message again, Xietain couldn't help but put down the cell phone and leave it on the table. He slumped gently onto the chair and, as he listened to the steady sound of lightning, his eyes flooded slightly with tears. Although he did not want to think about it, it was clear to Xietain that the probability that his family had died was very high indeed. After all, many people had turned into zombies without warning, zombies had started attacking ruthlessly, insects had evolved, and even domestic animals had turned wild. However, he really wasn't willing. The only real thing he had was his family after all. Barely resisting the urge to cry, Xietain picked up his cell phone again and dialed his father's number. Sitting in a nearby chair, Lilith felt a bit sad for him as she watched him act like a small child about to cry. Even when he was forced to fight for his life, even when he had no choice but to raise a sword and bathe in blood, even when his entire life was collapsing in front of him, Xietain was always decisive and did not hesitate. He fought when it was necessary to fight and used his brain to perfection to survive. However, in the face of his family's possible death, his calm had flown out the window.